The sun was warm, almost too warm for late May, but I didn't mind. I'd spent the entire morning rehearsing my smile in the mirror, brushing invisible lint off the soft lilac dress I'd picked weeks ago, the one that matched Mark's tie. Matching was his thing. Appearances, coordination, image. He said it made us look like a team. From the stands of the high school football field, I craned my neck and squinted against the sunlight, searching for our daughter in the sea of navy caps and gowns. I found her. Lily. My girl. My reason. Blonde hair tucked under the mortarboard, her grin wide and uncontained. My throat tightened. She looked like joy incarnate. I had my camera in hand, fingers curled around it as if it might steady my heart. I wanted to remember everything. The shaky speech from the principal, the flutter of Lily's sash as the wind caught it, the way her arms flailed as she hugged every single one of her friends. But most of all, I wanted to remember this moment, as a family. When the ceremony ended, I reached for Mark's hand. His was cold, detached. He didn't look at me, just muttered something about needing to talk. I followed him through the crowd, dodging smiling parents and clusters of teenagers. We stopped near the parking lot, just behind the row of oak trees that lined the field. It smelled like sunscreen and fresh-cut grass. Mark turned to face me, sunglasses still on. That annoyed me more than it should have. "I'm leaving," he said. "What?" I laughed once, short and automatic. "You mean to go pick up dinner?" I thought, "No, Amelia, I'm leaving." His voice was level. Too level, like he was ordering a drink. "I've been done for a long time. I just didn't say it out loud until now." My lips parted, but no words came. "There's someone else," he added, like he was tossing a receipt into the trash. "We've been involved for a while. I've got an apartment. Movers are scheduled tomorrow." The world narrowed. Sounds warped, muted, hollow, like I was underwater. Somewhere behind me, someone popped a bottle of sparkling cider. Cheers erupted. Lily's laugh rang through the air, clear as a bell. "Today?" I whispered. "You're telling me this today?" Mark shrugged. "Better now than later." I didn't. "Want to fake another dinner or family photo?" "I can't pretend anymore." I stared at him. His shirt collar was stiff and spotless, not a hair out of place. I noticed then there was no wedding ring on his finger. When had he taken it off? Had it been missing all day? "Does Lily know?" I asked. "No, not yet." His tone turned clipped. "I'll tell her when the time's right." "She's 18, Mark. She deserves the truth, not this cowardice." "Not today." But he was already stepping back, putting distance between us like I was contagious. I wanted to scream, to cry, to beg, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My entire body buzzed with shame. People were watching, weren't they? I looked around. Did anyone see this? See me, unraveling? I looked down and realized I was still holding the small gift bag I'd brought for him. Inside, a vintage compass I found on Etsy. A symbol, I'd told myself. A reminder that no matter how far life took us, we'd always find our way back. To each other. How poetic. How naive. Mark turned and walked toward his car without another word. I watched him go, the gift bag crinkling in my clenched hand, my wedding ring suddenly feeling like a shackle. Lily came bounding toward me seconds later, waving her diploma, eyes shining. "Mom, did you see me? Oh my God, I didn't trip. Did you get it on video?" I turned to her and somehow smiled. I would always smile for her. "Yes," I said, my voice hollow. "I got it." But my hands were trembling, and inside something had cracked wide open. If you had asked me back then, I would have told you Mark was the kind of man people instinctively followed, the kind who filled a room with gravity. We met at a university, mixer when I was 20, and still believed in fate more than I believed in patterns. He wore confidence like cologne, heavy, intoxicating, clinging to your skin long after he left. He spotted me from across the room, me in my secondhand dress and scuffed shoes, sipping cheap wine from a plastic cup, trying not to shrink into the wallpaper. I remember the way his eyes landed on me like a decision had already been made. "You look like you don't want to be here," he'd said, tilting his head. I smiled awkwardly. "I'm just not good at small talk." "Then let's have big talk." He grinned. "What's the last thing that moved you?" That was Mark. Sharp, charming, always a few beats ahead of everyone else. He chased me like I was a prize. Flowers. On my doorstep, late-night coffee runs, handwritten notes slipped into my sketchbook. I was an art history major buried in Botticelli and Monet, dreaming of gallery lights and dusty museums. He was in law, with pressed collars and a future so clearly mapped out you could see it in his walk. He made me feel chosen, like I was his escape from the rigid lines of case law and ambition. We married the year after graduation. I was 23. The ceremony was small, delicate. I wore my mother's earrings. He wore his father's watch. When I found out I was pregnant with Lily a few months later, I was in the middle of applying to grad schools in New York. "We'll figure it out," he said at first, kissing my forehead. "You can defer, just for a little while. Let's enjoy this season." A little while? That was 18 years ago. The easel in the sunroom gathered dust. The paints dried in their tubes. I told myself I was lucky to be there for every milestone. Every first word, every scraped knee. I curated motherhood like a gallery exhibit. Measured, beautiful, worth the sacrifice. Mark's career soared. Late nights became common. His cologne grew more expensive, his shoes more polished. He started attending more firm events without me, said they were just networking, and that he needed to go alone to keep things professional. At one of the few functions I did attend, I stood beside him in a navy cocktail dress I'd bought on sale, smiling too hard as one of his colleagues referred to me as Mark's charming accessory. Mark laughed. I laughed too, but my face ached from holding it. Friends tried to say things gently. "You don't seem like yourself anymore," one said, glancing at my hands, raw from endless dishwashing. Another asked, "Does he always speak to you like that?" After Mark dismissed my opinion in the middle of a dinner party like I was a misbehaving child, but I was quick with excuses. "He's just tired. It's a stressful time. He's under a lot of pressure." I defended him the way women are taught to, gracefully, repeatedly, blindly. And still I clung to the image. I posted birthday cakes and perfectly captioned family photos. I coordinated Christmas cards. I wore dresses to match his ties. That became my art. The art of looking happy. I remember one night, maybe a year before Lily's graduation. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, removing my makeup after a gala he attended alone. He came home, late, reeking of wine and something floral I didn't own. "You're still up?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Yeah," I said, voice tight. "How was it?" Same as always. I watched him in the reflection. He didn't meet my eyes. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I pulled the cold cream across my cheekbones and said nothing. That was the night I stopped wearing perfume. He used to compliment it. "You smell like violets." But that night, he didn't notice I wasn't wearing it at all. I told myself it was easier that way. And slowly, the woman I had been, the girl with paint under her nails and gallery dreams, was replaced by someone who measured life in grocery lists and birthday parties, who made herself small enough to be tolerated and quiet enough not to rattle the cage. The ring on my finger became less a promise and more a silencer. And the worst part was, I thought this was just what marriage was. That all women wore quiet. Sorrow like silk slips beneath their clothes. Looking back now, I see the signs. I see them all. But at the time, love looked a lot like endurance. Grief doesn't always arrive in sobs or shouted words. Sometimes it tiptoes in quietly, rattling doorknobs, knocking picture frames off center, making your house feel like it no longer knows you. 2 days after Lily's graduation, Mark moved. Out. There was no ceremony, no real goodbye. Just the sound of suitcase wheels clicking down the hall and the brief rustle of his garment bags as he pulled his tailored suits from the closet. I stood in the kitchen, frozen mid-slice of a lemon, while the blender hummed with an untouched smoothie. I'd made breakfast, as if habit could mask reality, as if scrambled eggs could tether him. He didn't look at me when he left. Didn't even take the gift bag I'd once clutched so tightly in the parking lot. The one with the engraved watch, and the note that now felt like a lie written by someone else. The front door clicked shut. And just like that, our house emptied by degrees. Lily barely spoke. She emerged from her room only to collect snacks or shuffle silently to the bathroom. Her music, soft, aching piano pieces, bled through the walls like a wound. I'd pause. Outside her door sometimes, hand raised to knock, but I never quite found the strength. I made dinners. Baked her favorite lasagna, Set the table with the good plates. No one came. No one ate. The food cooled in silence, and the plates went back into the cupboard untouched. I started folding laundry like it mattered. Pairing socks, smoothing out, sleeves. I lined up her shirts in color order, trying to impose some kind of structure on the chaos. The silence answered with nothing but the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. Then came the numbers. I wasn't naive when it came to our finances. I'd always trusted Mark to handle the logistics, but I wasn't blind. After the third alert from the bank app about suspicious activity, I sat down at his old desk with a pit in my stomach. Passwords I'd once known no longer worked. I had to dig through old notebooks to find one that hadn't been changed yet. When the accounts finally opened before me, it felt like stepping into a burnt-out house. The savings were gutted. The investment accounts closed. Gone. My name was no longer listed under the joint business account for the real estate investments Mark and I had started together 10 years ago. The trust account his firm had set up, in both our names. Now, in his alone. It didn't feel like an oversight. It felt like premeditation. I called him. He picked up on the third ring. "Why is my name off the accounts?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries. My voice was low, shaking. Mark sighed like I was inconveniencing him. "Because I consolidated. It's cleaner this way. You moved our money." "No, Amelia, I moved my money. You never really contributed to any of that." His voice was calm, calculated, like he was explaining a weather report. I couldn't speak for a long second. My hands trembled over the desk. "You told me to stay home. I gave you that time. I gave up my career." "You always said you hated corporate life," he cut in. "You never wanted to work anyway. Let's not rewrite history now just because it's convenient." The line crackled. I felt dizzy. "You took my name off everything." "I'm not going to argue about this," he said flatly. "We'll go through lawyers like everyone else. Let's not make this uglier than it needs to be." The call ended. I sat in the dark office, staring at the glowing screen until it logged me out for inactivity. Later that night, I walked into my walk-in closet. I'd been sleepwalking through each room of the house, watching the shell of my life collapse in slow motion. Mark's side was mostly bare now, save for a single tie he'd left behind. An expensive silk one I'd bought him for his 40th birthday. Burgundy. My favorite color. I opened the upper drawer of the built-in vanity where I kept my jewelry. A little wooden box. It had belonged to my grandmother. Dark cherry wood with tiny etched flowers along the lid. She used to keep her rosary and love letters inside it. I opened the box. Empty. No pearl necklace. No emerald ring. Not even the simple gold bracelet she'd worn every Sunday to Mass. Gone. Taken. Not lost. Taken. The scream that clawed its way out of me didn't sound human. It cracked against the walls like glass. I grabbed the nearest bottle, Chanel No. 5, a gift from years ago, and hurled it against the mirror. The perfume splattered, thick and floral and cloying, dripping down. Like blood from the shattered glass, I fell to my knees and screamed into a towel, over and over, until my voice broke and my throat burned, until the tile was soaked with tears and perfume and something ancient I didn't have a name for. I had given him everything. My time, my body, my youth, my name on birthday cakes, my hands in diapers, my silence at dinner parties, and now there was nothing left but echoes and ruins. I crawled to the back of the closet where I kept some of my older things. There was a dusty portfolio beneath a stack of off-season clothes. I pulled it out with shaking hands. Inside it, an old sketchbook. The cover was warped, the corners curled from years of neglect. I flipped it open. The self-portrait was on the third page. Charcoal and graphite. A woman sitting by a window, knees pulled to her chest, hair piled loosely on her head. Her eyes were fierce, honest, unapologetic. I didn't recognize her, but I wanted to. My fingers brushed the drawing, smudging the edge of her shoulder. I whispered the words before I realized I was saying them aloud. Never again. I would not be this hollowed-out woman one day longer. I would not let the version of me he erased stay buried. He had taken so much. But he hadn't taken me. Not completely. Not forever. And somewhere beneath the grief, a flicker of something unfamiliar began to burn. I left in the morning before the dew had burned off the grass. The sun was still just a suggestion behind the gray clouds, and the air smelled like something unfinished, like a sentence waiting for its last word. I packed only one suitcase. One. Isn't that absurd? 18 years of marriage, one child, one mortgage, and all I could stomach taking with me was a bag of clothes, my mother's locket, and a leather-bound journal I hadn't touched in years. I didn't even take the photo albums. Let him keep the glossy, staged memories. I'd start over with the shadows and silence. Lily was already with her Aunt Margot for the summer. She had wanted to spend it in New York anyway. City lights, subway noise, bubble tea on street corners. I told her I needed space, and she didn't ask questions. She's always been intuitive like that, my girl. Wise in a way I didn't know how to be at 17. The drive upstate was quieter than I expected. I didn't play music. I didn't cry. I just drove, the wheels humming beneath me like some lullaby for a woman coming undone. The farther I got from the city, the more the landscape began to breathe. Tall trees arching over winding roads, lakes shimmering like cracked mirrors, forgotten barns leaning into the wind. And then I arrived at the cottage. It was just as I remembered, and nothing like I remembered. Time had peeled the paint off the siding and warped the wooden steps. Ivy climbed the side like it was trying to swallow the house whole. My parents had built it in the late 70s, a dream never fully realized. After they died, it sat untouched, wrapped in spiderwebs and regret. Inside, it smelled like dust, mildew, and pine. I opened the windows, let the air cycle through, and stood in the middle of the living room, letting silence settle over me like a blanket. There were no mirrors in the entire place. I hadn't remembered that until I was there, brushing my teeth, and catching my blurred reflection in the dark kitchen window. I wondered if my mother had planned it that way, or if the cottage, like me, had simply given up on looking at itself. There was no Wi-Fi, no television, no signal strong enough to let me scroll away my grief. Just me, my journal, the lake, and the hollow ache of my own company. That first week, I didn't do much. I slept too long, ate too little, walked every morning because it was the only thing I could control. My legs moved on their own, like the body remembered what my heart hadn't yet caught up to. That movement meant survival. My thoughts chased each other like feral animals. What did I miss? Was she younger? Did he ever love me? Or did I just fit conveniently into his timeline? He told me it wasn't about her, that it was about him. Isn't it always? On the fourth day, I met Nora. She came walking up the drive in a straw hat and denim apron, holding a warm casserole dish wrapped in a red-checked towel. "You're the Cooper girl, aren't you?" she said, squinting. I laughed at that. No, one had called me that in 20 years. Amelia? Yes. Well, Amelia, she smiled. This place has needed footsteps in it again. It's good you came. Nora was a retired literature teacher and a widow. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had known sorrow intimately and survived it with her dignity intact. She brought me food every few days, simple things like baked zucchini or warm bread, and once a battered paperback of the Yowahayin Awakening. "This one saved me," she said. After Harold passed, I read it in one sitting, then again, slower, by candlelight. Then I started writing in the margins, notes to myself, questions I couldn't ask anyone else. I underlined. The phrase, "the voice of the sea," speaks to the soul. I didn't even like the ocean, but the metaphor lapped at my bones. And then, one evening, I started to paint again. At first, it was just color. Smears of red across cheap canvas. Then blue swirls that made no sense. I hadn't painted since Lily was born. Life had crowded out all the quiet things, but the brush remembered my hand. And soon the walls began to fill. A phoenix with ash in her feathers. A woman stepping out of water with flames trailing her fingers. A broken wedding ring sealed inside a glass jar. That ring. I had meant to throw it in the lake. Dramatic. Final. But I couldn't. So instead, I dropped it into an old mason jar from my mother's pantry, filled it with water, and sealed it shut. I put it on the windowsill. The sun hit it at just the right angle in the mornings, casting a golden ripple on the kitchen floor, symbolic, I guess. Pain contained. Not erased. Just held. I started therapy over the phone. A woman named Corinne. Her voice was soft and slow, like a lullaby sung from a great distance. "He didn't just betray you," she said one day. "He erased you." That word stuck in my ribs like a splinter. Erased. That's how it had felt, watching him pull away slowly, year after year. Not with cruelty. That would have been easier. No, he had withdrawn like ink in water, diluting me, making me question whether I had ever been vivid at all. But here, at the cottage, I was beginning to trace the edges of myself again. My wants, my voice, the woman beneath the wife, beneath the mother, beneath the silence. I found an old Polaroid. In a drawer one afternoon, my parents dancing barefoot on the dock, her in a sundress, him in suspenders. The edges were curling, and the colors had faded to sepia, but the joy was still loud in the image. I taped it to the wall above my makeshift bed. A reminder, love didn't always end in betrayal. Sometimes it was real, even if brief. Nora started, painting with me. She wasn't any good, she said. But that wasn't the point. We played old jazz records and drank iced tea and painted until our hands cramped. She told me stories about her students, about the man she had loved and lost. "You know," she said, "he wasn't perfect, but he never made me feel invisible." That night, I walked down to the lake barefoot. The water was colder than I expected. I let it lap at my calves. I whispered goodbye to the girl who had waited for a man to choose her, and I stood there until the stars came out. The first time I called it the Phoenix House, it was a joke. Something Nora said while handing me a mug of chamomile tea one evening. "You've painted this place back to life, Amelia," she told me, nodding toward the walls of the cottage, now alive with color. "You didn't just rise from the ashes, you set fire to them first." I laughed, but something in her words struck a chord so deep I couldn't ignore it. So I sat down that night with a glass of red wine, the lake humming under moonlight just beyond the porch, and I scribbled into my journal like a woman possessed. Sketches, phrases, dreams I didn't even know I still carried. By the time the candle guttered out beside me, I had the bones of a vision. A place for women like me. Women who had been silenced, erased, broken down until they couldn't recognize their own reflections. A place not just to survive, but to create. A place to become again. It started small. I applied for a local arts grant I found tacked to the community board outside the post office. I used the last of my savings to repair the roof and install running water that didn't taste like iron. I painted signs by hand. The Phoenix House, art and healing retreat for women. It felt ambitious, ridiculous even. But what did I have to lose? When the grant came through 3 months later, just enough to cover supplies and part-time help, I wept into my cereal bowl, laughing and crying so hard I scared the deer off the lawn. I opened the retreat that spring. The first guests arrived, in borrowed cars, their eyes heavy with grief and something like hope. A divorcee in her 40s who hadn't painted since high school, a cancer survivor who had lost her hair and her husband in the same year, a newly single mother fleeing abuse. They slept in the lofts I cleaned myself, ate in the kitchen where I'd once cried into soup alone, and they painted. They painted with the kind of hunger I knew intimately. I made no demands, no lessons, just blank canvases, open doors, and soft music. Some women painted in silence, others talked for hours as they created, stories pouring out of them like colors from a tipped jar. The cottage became sacred. The walls bloomed with trees and spirals, and hands reaching toward stars. Every few weeks I would paint over the old murals with white primer, and we would begin again. It wasn't about preservation, it was about process. One day, I found a feather tucked into the windowsill of the studio. Bright red, like fire. I don't know how it got there. We didn't have birds like that upstate, but I kept it. Taped it inside my journal. A reminder that something holy had passed through here. I started writing again, not just in margins. I launched a blog under a pseudonym, She Who Paints in Fire. It was meant to be private, quiet. A diary left open for the wind. But one night, I wrote about emotional erasure, how it wasn't the betrayal itself that haunted me, but the way he had rewritten me out of my own life. Like I was never the co-architect of our marriage, like I was just a shadow that moved behind him, never in focus. That post went viral. Thousands of women, messages from Brazil, Australia, Kansas, stories that echoed mine. Thank you. They wrote. You put into words what I couldn't say. I read each one, sometimes 3 or 4 times. We were a chorus of the silenced, singing back to one another. I launched a podcast. Just my voice, low and quiet, speaking like a friend over tea. I named it Ashes and Ink. I didn't do interviews, just monologues, truth-telling in the dark. And it mattered. I mattered. Even to people who had never seen my face. But justice, that old impossible ghost, still tugged at me. I didn't want revenge. Not in the cartoonish slash his tires kind of way. I wanted acknowledgement, restoration. I wanted the truth to stop being something I whispered only in my journal or into Nora's porch light. So I called Gwen, an old college friend who had once been my roommate and now worked as a forensic accountant. Tell me I'm being paranoid, I said. You're not, she replied. I've seen this before. Together, we dug. Quietly, carefully. Mark, it turned out, had built his empire on shadows. Shell companies, offshore accounts, tax evasion wrapped in glossy presentations. But worse than that, he'd forged my signature on 2 legal documents, filed with his firm, ones that gave him control over shared assets I never consented to sign away. I held the proof in my hands, shaking. But I wasn't scared. Not this time. I filed a civil suit. Fraud, forgery, hidden assets. My lawyer was calm. And brilliant. A woman recommended by Gwen, with a voice like tempered steel. Every move we made was surgical. Mark didn't even see it coming. Meanwhile, Lily came to stay with me for a week. I wasn't sure how it would go. We hadn't been close. Not really. Not since the cracks in my marriage began to splinter into her childhood. She'd been distant, angry, but when she stepped out of the cab and into the dirt driveway of the cottage, her face softened. It smells like sage and paint, she said, wrinkling her nose. That's exactly what it is. We spent the first day dancing around each other, careful not to touch the old wounds. But by the second, she wandered into the studio and ran her fingers along the paint jars. You ever think Dad hated that you loved this? She asked. I blinked. What? He always made fun of your art, called it your little hobby. I hated that. I hadn't known she remembered. I told her everything that night. The affair, the documents, the gaslighting, the lies so subtle they felt like dreams I couldn't quite recall. She listened, quiet at first. Then she cried. I thought you were weak, she whispered. I'm sorry. I was weak, I told her. But that's not the end of the story. The next morning, she painted a mural on the back cottage wall, the one facing the trees. A tree cracking through a slab of concrete. Roots like lightning veins. Leaves in blood red and gold. I watched her from the porch, arms crossed, heart full. I think it's the best thing anyone's ever painted here, I said when she finished. She smiled at me, then wiped her hands on her jeans. It's yours now. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in the hallway, the one I'd finally installed after almost a year of living without reflections. I saw her, the woman I'd once buried under his comfort, his cruelty, his carefully crafted reality. She had lines under her eyes, paint under her nails, a scar near her temple from where she fell off a swing at 9. But her eyes were alive, not haunted, present. I touched the feather I had taped to the corner of the mirror. I hadn't noticed until that moment how it caught the light, glowing red and gold like fire. I whispered to her, You did it. Not perfectly, not cleanly, not without rage or mistakes or sobbing into Nora's lemon bars, but I had climbed out. I had clawed out, and I had brought others with me. The morning of the court date arrived cloaked in rain. It wasn't a violent storm, just a steady curtain of water that blurred the trees and made the world feel hushed. I took it as a gift, a washing away, a ritual, the kind of cleansing nature offers when words fail. I wore a soft gray suit that had once belonged to my mother. Tailored decades ago, but still classic. The fabric held her scent faintly, lavender and rosewood, and I fastened her old silver locket around my neck. Inside it was a photo of Lily at 5, beaming with bubble gum on her cheek, a reminder of love, of why I had done all of this. Mark was already inside the courtroom when I arrived. He turned as I entered. For a brief, surreal moment, I saw the man I used to know, the one who kissed my shoulder in grocery store aisles and carried Lily to bed when she fell asleep during movies. But then I blinked, and all that remained was the man who signed my name without asking, who called my voice. Too much. Who reduced my world to spreadsheets and silence. He didn't smirk. Not this time. His confidence, the kind that once filled entire rooms, had thinned. His jaw was tight. His hands fidgeted in his lap. I sat down and folded mine over the locket. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No gavel slams or gasps, just muted tones. The shuffle of papers, the soft murmur of procedure. But inside my chest, something thundered. When it was my turn to speak, I stood. I presented the documents, the forgeries, the offshore accounts, the hidden assets. My lawyer spoke with clinical clarity. I spoke with calm conviction. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I told the truth, and in the quiet after, I felt something shift. The judge ruled in my favor. Not just financially, though I was awarded a fair portion of the assets he'd tried so desperately to keep, but more importantly, the court acknowledged the fraud, the deceit, the erasure. I was no longer just a woman recovering from betrayal. I was seen. Outside, the sky had cleared. A handful of reporters waited near the courthouse steps. Not many, but enough. I hadn't planned to speak, but one woman, maybe mid-30s, holding a recorder with trembling fingers, stepped forward. "Ms. Wren?" she asked. "Do you have a statement for other women going through what you did?" I thought for a moment, then said, "Healing isn't revenge, it's remembering who you are." And then I walked away. That night, he emailed me. The subject line was blank. The message said only, "I didn't know you had it in you." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I didn't need to say anything at all. I forwarded it to my lawyer, then deleted it. No anger, no gloating, just nothing. A silence filled with power, not pain. Back at the cottage, the studio buzzed with warmth and wine. It was the night of my first private exhibit, a celebration for the women who had walked this path with me. Some had stayed at the retreat, others had followed my blog, my podcast. Most I had never met in person, but the room felt like home. The walls were filled with work, raw, stunning, sacred. My own pieces hung alongside theirs, a tapestry of resurrection. My final piece, centered under a skylight, was titled Graduation Day. It showed a woman walking barefoot away from a burning house, a rolled-up diploma tucked under one arm. Her shoulders were bare, her back strong. The flames behind her reached toward the sky, wild and beautiful. But she never looked back. The diploma read one word: freedom. I stood beside it and watched as people lingered, their eyes glassy. Some whispered, one woman touched her own wedding ring, then quietly slipped it off. Lily stood beside me, arms crossed, head tilted. "You know what I love about her?" she said, gesturing to the woman in the painting. "What?" "She's not afraid of the fire. She walks through it." I looked at my daughter, this fierce, luminous human, and felt something rise in my throat. Gratitude, maybe, or grace. The night ended with music and laughter. Someone brought a guitar, someone else passed around lavender lemonade spiked with gin. Nora made her famous lemon bars and kissed me on the cheek before slipping out early with her cane. Later, after the last guest had gone, I sat alone in the studio, barefoot on the wooden floor. I closed my eyes and listened to the hum of the night. Frogs chirping near the lake, wind brushing the eaves, the faint creak of the old rafters settling. I took the locket off and placed it gently on the window sill beside the feather I'd never moved. Then I whispered the words I'd been too afraid to say for years. "I forgive you." I wasn't sure who I meant. Him. Myself. The past. All of it. But the moment I said it, something inside me, something ancient and aching, exhaled, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt peace. Not the kind you chase or beg for. Not the kind that comes from getting what you want, but the kind that arrives when you let go.